So I have Trajann V here, a famous Khorne modder for Total War Warhammer 3, very popular. And today we're going to be asking interview questions about modding and his mod specifically in the game.
Hello, I am Trajann V, and like Dosper said, I am a modder for Total War Warhammer 3 on Steam, and I have been for almost 2 years now.
Man, that's actually quite a while. It's crazy, 2 years have flown by. I remember your first mod, so yeah, it's been
Oh,
a
yeah,
long time.
absolutely. I mean, when I started, I had no idea I'd be doing it for this long. I thought, okay, I might upload one or two, and that'd be it. But yeah, almost 2 years later, and it's become one of my biggest hobbies that I've ever had.
Okay, we're gonna dive into the mod questions now. Can you explain what creating a game mod means?
So mod, fairly certain, stands for modification. And it can sometimes vary depending on like game to game. But in the case of Total Warhammer 3, it is basically you're modifying the game in some way, whether that be modifying how a unit looks, modifying how a feature works, modifying the stats of something. So you're not necessarily creating something like entirely totally new. You are modifying things that already exist within the game itself.
If someone wanted to learn how to mod Total War Warhammer 3, where should they start?
That's a little tricky because at the moment there's not exactly like too many real options for like proper beginners. Which like it kind of sucks, but that's just kind of the way it is. What I could suggest is you can simply just on YouTube search up like Total Warhammer 3 modding guides. There are two channels specifically that I would recommend. One is Blind Leading the Colorblind. I actually learned quite a bit from him. He's made actually like quite a few dozen mod tutorial videos specifically on Warhammer 3, kind of covering various things. And then another one is a channel, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing his name, Dietrich Stoffer. He hasn't made too many videos, but he's made one very long and comprehensive video on like the basics of modding Warhammer 3. So I think those two channels in particular are really good options. Alternatively, there might be other channels. If you literally just search Warhammer 3 modding, other people might come up. That's on YouTube. And then a really good option for a written guide is if you just Google Christ War's Total War Warhammer 3 modding guide. Christ War is a community modder. He has made some really great mods. And he has a very extensive written tutorial on almost every single aspect you'd need to know for modding. Obviously, it's a little harder it's going to be more time consuming because you have to read everything rather than just watching a video, but he is a very good source for beginners especially.
What's the hardest part about creating mods, and is there any particular moments that stand out for you?
Truthfully, I don't know if it's necessarily the hardest part, but it's the most annoying part, is having to constantly make a change in RPFM, make that change, then load up the game and see if that change works. And encountering like, oh, does it cause a crash? Is it working properly? And then, okay, you're like, great, that one thing works, then you have to go back into RPFM, make another small little change, then reopen the game and keep checking and see, hey, does this work? And it's just a constant back and forth of open one thing, open another, check, open, then close, open, close, open, close. It's a back and forth endlessly on repeat. It's so annoying. That's kind of how you have to do it, because if you make too many changes at one time and then you open the game and you encounter a crash, you're like, oh shoot, what change did I make that is causing this crash or causing these errors?
Wow, so it sounds like a lot of launching, okay, it worked, go back, make a change, launch, go back, over and over and over and over.
Basically, yeah. My dad, I've filled him in on a lot of the modding stuff, and he uses Steam, and so many times he said, oh, hey, I can tell when you're modding because I can see constantly Trajann V is starting Total Warhammer 3, and then a few minutes later, Trajann V is playing Total Warhammer 3, and it's just constantly off, on, off, off.
Next question is, what tools or programs do you use as a modder, and would these be safe for beginners, or are they more expert level modding tools?
So there's sort of two very big ones. The first is RPFM, or Rusted Pack File Manager. And it is what basically allows you to change and edit every single thing about a mod. That is where you're going to edit a unit's stats, their abilities, how they're recruited, edit the text. Literally everything technical about a mod is done via RPFM. You, for the most part, cannot make a mod without it. It also allows you to see the internal files of the base Warhammer 3, so you can look and see, hey, what has CA made? How have they done their thing? And then you can kind of be like, okay, this is really good for like references. So if you're like, I want to make a variant of just say like an Empire swordsman, and instead he's got like a hammer or something like that, you can, look in CA's version or CA's files and be like, hey, how did they do it? And then you can just kind of almost copy that over to yours. So it's a great way of almost like cheating and seeing the internals behind the game. And then so that's RPFM. And then the second one is another big one. It is Asset Editor. And an Asset Editor is basically your 3D modeler. It's how you're going to make the units, how you're going to change their textures, how you're going to give them armor, make their weapons. Basically everything visual about a mod, the actual in-game models, is done via Asset Editor. And so those are the two probably biggest mods. Obviously, it kind of depends on what you're doing. If you're purely just a visual person, you might not even need RPFM. And if you're purely a technical person, you might not need Asset Editor.
Okay, the next question is, does modding in Total War Warhammer 3 have set limitations?
Honestly, we're pretty lucky. RPFM and Asset Editor are both like extremely well-made tools that really allow you to kind of have almost total freedom. That being said, there are some limitations in that some certain things are simply just coded into the game, and it's coded so deep in a way that we just can't access it. One of the bigger examples is you cannot change or make new attributes. And that is a sort of pain point, especially for me, because in the game, some abilities rely on checking what attribute a unit might have in order to apply it buffs. For example, the Contempt for the Chaos Dwarves, the Ogre attribute for Ogres, that kind of thing. And there is no way currently to make a new attribute or to change anything about one. And that's like the biggest one. I'm sure there are other examples of things, but so like for the most part, we're very lucky. We, in what we have access to, but there are just some things that we just can't do.
The next question we have is similar along the lines of a mod. You might have already kind of touched upon some of this, but what is a basic mod type that anyone could make?
The simplest mod truly is like if you just want to change the stats of a unit. For example, if your favorite unit, let's say the Carnosaur, and you're like, I want my Carnosaur to have higher weapon strength, you can simply just open up RPFM. You have to change a single table and a single entry in that table, and there you go. You've just changed the stats, you've made your Carnosaur better, and that's that. That same thing applies to like if you want to change an ability. Say, for example, the Strength from Flesh ability, which gives a unit healing while they're in combat. For the longest time, it was 0.2% healing. They recently nerfed that to 0.15, and if you're like, well, I know I want the 0.2 back, you can very easily just go into RPFM and just change a single value in a single table, and there you go. You've done that. That's a technical sort of simple mod, and then more of a visual simple mod is just doing a reskin. Doesn't have to be something crazy, but in Asset Editor, maybe just changing like the color of a unit, or maybe adding a couple of additional armor pieces to a unit. is like super simple to do. So you don't have to go through the process of making an entire new unit, trying to do entirely new textures, trying to reanimate and all that kind of stuff. If you just simply think, hey, my Empire swordsman, I want him to have a couple of extra armor plates, it's very easy to do something like that.
The next question, you've actually already mentioned the free, pretty much free assets people can learn to mod. Is there any paid ways that someone could learn to mod in general, or skills they could acquire that would be applicable to modding that would be something they have to pay for?
Necessarily think so. I don't know if there's necessarily like teachers out there who are like, hey, if you pay me, I'll teach you how to mod. That might be on like a person by person basis. For the most part, like I said, the programs that we use mainly are free. The only, I think, money situation you might encounter is if you want to edit images, such as editing textures or making unit cards. Photoshop, I know, is probably the #1 tool that people use, and I believe that's paid for. I don't think you get that for free. There are alternatives to Photoshop that are free. For example, I use a program called GIMP, and I believe that is very much like just a side grade to Photoshop. I think Photoshop is still better, but GIMP is free, and that is what allows me to edit textures, make my unit cards, change colors of icons and such. So yeah, if you want to spend the money and get Photoshop, you certainly can, but if you didn't, I don't think really you need to pay a single cent if you truly wanted to start modding Warhammer.
Okay, next question here. I know I see a lot of modders. Obviously, modding is very popular, probably more popular now than what it has been in the past 5, 6, 7 years. It seems to be very popular. Yeah. Do modders make money creating mods?
Yes and no. So I can't say if I'm 100% accurate on this. I'm 99% sure that legally, modders are not allowed to get paid specifically for mods they make. That's because modding, like I said in the very beginning, we are modifying things that already exist in the game. We're not making entirely new things that are unique to us. We are taking things that CA has made. So CA, they own pretty much everything about this game, and so I don't know exactly, again, what law it is or what the exact wording is, but I just know that if you were to charge people for mods that you make using CA's assets, and you get caught, you could be in a lot of trouble. So modders, I mean, they're not exactly, you can't get paid outright. What you can receive are donations. And donations are, of course, just, they're not required. It's just purely if someone just wants to support you, and that's totally fine because you're not getting paid to make something, you're getting paid sort of because you make something. I don't know, it's weird wording, but I do know that donations are totally fine. CA has no issue with that.
I know you've told me before that you do accept donations as well. Would you say that you're probably one of the higher volume modders out there for the number of mods you've created? Do you think that people donate more regularly, or is it more of a rare thing? Does it incentivize you at all to create mods, or is it more like that's just nice?
For me personally, it's just nice. At the anytime I upload a mod onto Steam, at the very, very bottom, I have a link to where people can donate, and I always specify that donations are appreciated, but they are absolutely not required. I would still mod even if I never made a single cent. And that's just because it's not a job. This is very much a hobby. It's a hobby I enjoy. And I will, do this as long as I enjoy it. Money is very much just like, hey, it's a nice little thing on the side. If somebody, really likes my work and they want to send me $5 here, that's great. I've had some really generous people who have sent like $50, and some people who are, they do like a recurring monthly payment. And that's really nice. That's by no means saying that I'm rich and I'm raking in the money off donations. It is a very, I wouldn't say like completely rare, but it's not exactly like I can use it as an income.
No, that makes perfect sense. And in the bottom, I will be putting your donation link down in the description if anybody wants to donate or if they just want to check it out. The next question is, do modders mentor or partner up on a regular basis?
It's hard for me to say because like everyone is different. Some modders very much like to keep to themselves and just do their own thing, whereas others, like for example the skeleton crew or the SFO team, I believe the Great Harmony Sentinel team, that's a collaboration between many different community modders all making one big thing. So it very much, it just depends on the people and the scope of the project. Obviously, for the most part, if you're just making a single unit, you might not necessarily need help with anything. But if you're making this grand project of you're making almost an entirely new faction with entirely new mechanics, new units and everything, I think absolutely people will want to bring in help because like with anything in life, people are going to be good at some things and not good at others. For example, I do think I'm good at making units. I think I'm good at visual design, but I am absolutely awful when it comes to scripting. I cannot script to save my life, and a lot of really fun things in the game, specifically faction mechanics or recruiting mechanics, questing, all that stuff is done in scripting. And so for me, I can't really include much of that in my mod because I do not have the experience. So if I wanted to, if I really desired to make a certain mod that had those aspects in it, I could absolutely reach out to someone who I know is good at scripting, be like, hey, I want to do this. Could you help me with this aspect? And I think in general, the community is very okay with helping each other. It's not like a case where people feel like, oh no, I'm this super renowned modder, you're below me, I'm not going to bother with you. I think in general, the community is very good with helping each other.
I've noticed that a lot of mods that have been abandoned or just where the original creator is no longer around, a lot of people have taken those over, and continued them on. I've really noticed that it seems like in Warhammer 3, especially versus 2, that there's been a lot more camaraderie in the modding community, and a lot more people don't want to see things disappear, if that makes sense.
Oh, for sure. I mean, if you have like a favorite mod that you use all the time, and then the creator abandons it for whatever reason, and that's totally fine. I mean, again, this is a hobby. People have, real life to deal with. Some people might have jobs, families, whatever. You see a mod that you love getting abandoned, I mean, of course, you're going to want to try and keep that alive. So I think as long as you get, of course, the original creator's permission, I think it's totally fine to try and remake that mod, or at least keep it updated, and people are usually really good about letting people do that kind of thing.
What inspired you to start modding in Total War Warhammer 3?
Thing is, I started modding sort of actually before Warhammer 3, but not publicly. In Warhammer 2, I, like many people, I used mods, and that was great. But in some of the mods, I kind of felt that, oh, hey, I wish this was different. I wish this value was higher. I wish this worked differently. I wish this character had this ability rather than that one. And so in Warhammer 2, that's basically what I did. It's just for my own personal use. I just changed one small little thing about someone's mod that I was using. And that was that. That's all I ever really did. Then when Warhammer 3 comes around, truly, I fell in love with Khorne so deeply. And as soon as that happened, I just had all these ideas of, oh, it'd be so cool if Khorne had this. It'd be so cool if Khorne had that. Oh, I wish this, I wish that. And one day, I just got in my head, why don't I just do that? Why don't I just make the thing that I want to play? And so, yeah, I mean, from there, that was it. I wanted to play with the thing. No one was making it. I wasn't really seeing many Khorne things, or at least the things that I wanted. And so I decided, hey, I could just do it myself.
All right. There's really not that many Khorne modders, really not that many modders for each of the Chaos Gods, to be honest. It seems like there'll be one for a while, and then they won't make anything new for a long time.
Yeah, it's not like... You're right in that sometimes there are those gems that kind of pop up out of nowhere. You're like, oh wow. You check like the most recent on Steam and you see this crazy like Slanesh thing or crazy Urgle thing. You're like, oh wow, that's so cool. But the modder themselves are not like specific to Slanesh or Nurgle or whatever, and so you might not ever see a mod from them again. Truly, I think just everyone's different. Everyone has their favorite factions. Everyone likes to make things for certain people. And for whatever reason, chaos in general just isn't super. I wouldn't say chaos in general. It's more the four gods specifically that don't have a lot of love. Because I think chaos, like Undivided, there's actually like quite a few of just like generic, here's a chaos thing, here's a chaos thing. When it comes to the four gods, that's when it kind of gets a bit more specific and there's not like a crazy amount of variety.
The next question here is, how do you stay motivated throughout the modding process? I'm sure it takes a long time for you to make some of these mods.
So, truthfully, obviously, like I said, I've been doing this for almost 2 years, so I've kind of gotten the hang of how mods work, and so I could create a single unit from start to finish in probably a day, just depending on how in-depth that unit is, but that's just one unit, and so, like, obviously, if a mod has 6 units, that's going to take a couple of days, 3 days. Like a single character can take, 2 days, depending on how involved I get with the skill trees and abilities and stuff. But in general, staying motivated it's very, and this is almost some of the best advice I can give to someone, is this is a hobby. This is very much, it's not a job. It is not your life. This is a hobby, and it is meant to be fun. And if you are not having fun, then you simply just need to take a break. And that's what I do, is if I'm not having fun making something, or I'm just not in the mood to make something, just don't. I don't feel the pressure that I need to get this thing out in time, or I need to make something a very specific way. If I'm not in the mood to make something, I don't. I take a break from modding, I go play a different game, I go watch something on Netflix, that kind of thing. I go about my life normally, because this is a hobby. It is a side thing to do.
If somebody was struggling to create their first mod, would that be the same advice you would give them along those lines?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, again, you're not, this might sound a little harsh, but you're not a game developer. This is not your job. You don't have a timeline. You don't have a boss that's shouting at you saying, hey, get this in this time frame. You are your own boss when it comes to modding. You are able to make whatever you want and take as long as you want and make it however you want. There is no pressure. The only pressure is the kind of pressure that you put on yourself. And I don't think that is healthy for modding, because if you're trying to make a mod and you're not in the spirit of it, you're not having fun, you're like, ugh, I really don't want to do this, the mod's not going to be as good as it could be. Because you're not putting your heart into it, you're not giving it your all. So I think truly, like, sometimes you just need to take a break. Sometimes you just need to be like, okay, I'm going nowhere with this, I'm frustrated, I'm not having fun. Just put it down, go do something else, maybe come back to it in a day or two and be like, okay, I have a new mindset, I've taken a break, I'm gonna fight a different way.
How many Khorne mods have you created for Total War Warhammer 3?
So not including compilations that are just like a bunch of mods all wrapped into one, I have made 33 individual Khorne mods, and that equates to a little over 50% of my entire workshop's library.
Wow, that's impressive. That's quite a bit.
Yeah.
The next question here is, why Khorne and not Nurgle, Slanesh, Tzeentch, or any other faction?
So initially, in Total Warhammer 2, my favorite was the Lizardmen. I loved them. They were my favorite. But yeah, as soon as Warhammer 3 came out, Khorne it took hold of me. And truthfully, the simplest answer I can give is I just love their visual design. I love how they look. I love how their units sound. I love everything about how they look. From like the crazy armored people to the big bloodthirsters with flaming axes to like the mechanical juggernauts being ridden by demons. It's all of that is just, it appeals to like the inner child of me that's like, that is cool as hell, and I love that. I think also their gameplay is just really, really fun for me. Just the idea of I'm gonna hit you in the head with a stick, but my stick is just like 10 times bigger than any stick you could possibly have. Khorne is just this overwhelming force when it comes to melee. That idea is so fun to me. Anytime I play other games, the biggest example is one of my favorite game of all time is Dark Souls 3. And whenever I play that game, I am always finding the heaviest weapon and I am hitting someone as hard as I can. And so I think that just me personally, that play style and that aesthetic is just extremely appealing. And that kind of also leads into I love their lore. I love the idea that Khorne is just this big angry guy on a throne who hates the world and it's like, I want everyone in this world to die. I think that's just, it's such a silly thing that you'd only find in Warhammer of the just, I'm angry and I'm going to let the world know how angry I am. And it's going to be a battle to see who can be the angriest.
No, that makes perfect sense. I definitely like the aggressiveness of Khorne and the fact that the fact that they're so good in melee, they do make them a more simple faction to play too, in my opinion, compared to a lot of other factions where you don't have to micro as heavy, I guess, if that would be the right way to put it. So I do like that their faction mechanics are more, like if you're a beginner, like if someone was a beginner, I think they would be very fine playing a Khorne faction if they're a beginner in Total War games.
Oh yeah, I think Khorne, I get exactly. The nice thing about Khorne is that they're so simple. It's very much just point and click. You send your units to go hit another unit, and you can just let them do their thing. There's no crazy cavalry micro that you have with something like the Wood Elves, where you have like archers constantly, or like Bretonia, where you have to cycle charge. There's no crazy spell management of like trying to figure out what spell for what case. It's very simple. Just you click on a bad guy, and you just let your units go and kill them.
What would you say is your favorite mod that you've created?
It's so hard because that's almost like picking, hey, what's your favorite child? I think truly it's very the reskin I did that turned every single Lizardman unit Khorne is probably my favorite, and that's not to be confused with the mod that adds Khornate Lizardman units to Khorne's roster. I'm talking specifically about taking every single Lizardman unit. That includes Regiments of Renown, the Blessed units, Vanilla units, Heroes, Lords, whatever. Every single one of them, I reskin them to fit with Khorne. And I think that's my favorite just because of the scale of it. Taking an entire faction and changing the way, not just like a simple, textural reskin, but giving them entirely new armor, glowing effects, changing their weapons, everything about that, I think makes my favorite because I'm very proud of the work that I did on that.
No, I really enjoyed that mod as well. I actually covered it months ago now, but I did cover that mod way back in a spotlight, and it was great. I really enjoyed it. It's one of my favorite Lizardman mods just because it does change everything about it. And I do think that reskins get a bad rap from a lot of people that don't understand modding as much. They think that reskins are probably just easy, like extremely easy. But I think reskins are impressive because there's a lot of detail in those reskins, just in general.
Oh, for sure, yeah. I mean, like I said in the earlier question of what simple mod you can make, yes, there can absolutely be some very simple reskins, and that's totally fine if you just want to, again, simply change how a single unit looks a little bit. That's totally fine if that's your thing. But yeah, when it comes to entire faction reskins, it is a lot of modeling you have to do. It's a lot of texture work. Depending on how crazy you go with changing like armor and stuff, you have to re-rig a lot of mesh and models and make things work. Like trying to, stick some Khorne armor onto a Saurus. Sometimes that can be very finicky. So it's a lot of also just trial and error, seeing, hey, does this work? Oh, I gotta find a new piece. Okay, does this work? Okay, let's change the texture. Oh, the texture didn't work how I wanted to. I gotta go back and redo the texture. So yeah, I mean, it's even something like a reskin, it can be incredibly time consuming.
We've heard what your favorite mod is that you've created yourself. What's your favorite mod that's created by another modder?
So I think, truthfully, it's a more recent mod. But it is the customized starting units mod by, I believe, his name is Sudks. Sudks. I don't know 100%. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing his name. But it's such a simple mod. Like, again, all it does is when you start the game, your starting army, you can just change all the units in your starting army. And you could do this before this mod was made, but it required you to go into RPFM and like write a script and say specifically what units you want your army to start with. You couldn't like change them from campaign to campaign. You had to actually manually in the script change and set exactly what units. And obviously for someone who doesn't know how to mod, they couldn't do that because that's just so outside of their realm of knowledge. So what's great about Sutsk mod is anyone can use it because it's just a mod you have to download, and as soon as you start the game, you can just change whatever units you want in your starting army. And what's great is that it also includes modded units. So for me, for example, I can have access to my entire Khorne library from turn 1. And so it actually makes it also great for testing units, because sometimes, if a unit I make is locked behind tier 5 in a settlement and like the highest tier building, it can take a couple of turns even with console commands to get there. But if I just use the customized starting units mod, I can have it turn 1, and that's great for testing. So I think in terms of just a simple quality of life mod, customizing starting units is perfect.
So on the next question here, which Khorne units that you've created, because I know you've made quite a few, are you the most proud of, or any that really stand out to you as individual units?
Yeah, again, it's almost like picking your favorite child, because maybe it sounds cocky, but I'm proud of the work that I've done, and so there's a lot of units that I really, really love. I think that one of the best visually designed units I've made is my hero, Korgoth the Unleashed. He is I believe it's the Doom Bull from the Beastmen, but basically fused together with the Kadai Destroyer. And so it's basically a mechanical bull of Khorne. And I think that the way that I was able to take the Kadai parts and attach them to the Doom Bull and kind of make him this machine flesh hybrid experiment, I think he turned out really, really well. I was very, very proud of him. I think that the Blood Titan I made is more of, I'm just surprised I was able to make it work. It's based off a Terracotta Sentinel for Khorne, and when I'm making him, I couldn't really figure out a way to just take the base Terracotta Sentinel and make it look Khornish. I couldn't just like add armor to it or change its skin. It wouldn't be working. So I thought, what if I just make a model from scratch? And I had never done that before. I'd always just all my units were like existing units and just change them in certain ways, whether it be texture or armor. This was the first time I was making something almost from scratch. And the crazy thing is that the Blood Titan is very much just made out of machinery. It's not like your basic body part. It's not like legs, head, chest, arms. It's very much just like its legs, I think, are made up of like pieces from a skull cannon and like the chassis of a soul grinder, and its torso is made up of like a juggernaut's torso, but also a skull cannon and a blood shrine. So it's all of these mechanical pieces that have almost been like fused together to make this gigantic walking mech. So I was really proud that I was able to make it work. It's still a little janky in terms of like animation and stuff, but overall I'm very proud of it. And I think that the Blood Saurian I made, which is very much just Khorne's Dread Saurian, I think that one, especially the Regiment of Renown version I have, which has sort of a brass like jaw ornament on it, I think that one, I just think it looks really freaking cool. Especially now that I've recently updated it and added the proper like Howdah with skink gunners on it, and of course that's all been converted to Khorne. So it is just now this walking fortress of skink darts and blowgunners mounted atop this just scary, Godzilla on all fours type monster. And I think that it just truly just makes the inner kid in me go, that's cool as hell.
Yeah, I've got to say I'm a really big fan of any of your units that are the black and brass or black and gold, like kind of look to them.
Oh yeah.
I really like those. I think it really aesthetically, I think they're very pleasing to the eye. And then on top of that, when they're in combat, they get the red because of all the blood.
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, those have always been a really big favorite for me. Some of your units that are like a lot of red, or they're glowing red, where they're like just a lot of red all over. Some of those, I feel like that in combat they become very muddled because of that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But the black and bronze units, when they get into combat, it actually just makes them stand out more, in my opinion. If there was so pretty much the next question is, for someone who's never tried your mods before, what mod would you recommend them to try and why?
So obviously it'd be easy for me to say, oh, just download my Khorne compilation. You have all my Khorne stuff in one place. There you go. I can understand that that is a lot of content in one package. And if you're someone who's totally new to me, specifically me and my modding style, it can be very overwhelming to be forced with, oh my god, there's so much. So I don't think I could recommend that for someone who's like totally new, unless you just, if you're in love with Khorne much as I am, then yeah, go for it, because you'll have so many new toys to play with. But I think if you want a good balance of not too much content, but also enough content to really make you like feel like, oh wow, this was so worth it, would be my Khorne characters compilation. And that includes all the Khorne characters that I've made, which I think is 7 at this point. I think there's 4 lords. Oh no, it's gotta be more at this point, because I don't know, it contains a variety of lords and heroes. And I think they're a good place because, one, characters specifically have a lot of time and love put into them. A single unit, while I love all the units I've made, they're simple. It's a single unit, so like not a whole lot of crazy flair to it. When it comes to characters, they've got so much going for them. They've got a whole set of abilities they can unlock. They have their entire skill trees. They have their ancillary items to provide new abilities. In general, obviously, characters have a lot more visual love put into them, so they kind of have a lot more like a visual flair to them. A lot more love put in. And what's also great is if you do like units, all of my characters come with their own unique regiment of renown. So you're getting a package of having a really cool character to play with, and also a regiment of renown that's kind of specific to them and pairs well with them and their playstyle.
Do you have any future plans for upcoming mods or any ideas you're currently thinking of?
That's a good question, because truthfully, the answer could be yes and it could be no. At any point in time, I could have an idea just suddenly make its way into my head and be like, oh, I want to do that. And sometimes I can go a month or two without having any ideas. But what I can say for right now, what's currently in my head, is there was a mod on Steam called Marcus's Heretic Roster, I believe is the name of it, and it basically added gun units to Khorne. And that mod has since sort of been stopping updated. The creator, Marcus Aurelius, has just stopped modding, but for whatever reason stopped updating. And I checked with him, and he has given me permission to essentially remake it in whatever way I feel necessary, or in any way I feel. So I definitely want to do that. I don't exactly have like a time frame, but it's something that is definitely in the works currently. I'd also really like to make a trio of dragon legendary lords. One would be for the High Elves, one for the Dark Elves, and one for the Wood Elves. So 3 different dragons, but in like the same pack, and make like basically just legendary lords that are dragons. I have no idea how I'd go about doing that. What like mechanics I'd give them, what abilities, what. But it's something I've really wanted to kind of play around, because I love dragons. There's like when you're a kid, in general, you're either dinosaurs or dragons, and as a kid, I was always dragons. So that's something I definitely want to try and do. One thing I would love and absolutely love to do is make a proper Lizardmen of Khorne faction. Because at this point, I have reskinned their entire roster. I have made I've made legendary lords. I've made legendary heroes. I've made generic lords and generic heroes for Lizardmen to fit into Khorne. So I've done basically all of the actual unit stuff. I just have to get around to doing the technical stuff of making a faction. And that is where a lot of the problem comes in, because it is a lot of work to make a proper new faction in game. Obviously, I could go the easy route and just make it just like, hey, if you select this lord, you just get access to all these units in one place. But I feel like that's sort of cheap. I want to make like a proper faction with its own mechanics, and basically like exclude all of the like true generic Khorne stuff and just have it be Lizardmen of Khorne in this one faction. It's very, but again, the technical side to that and making all of that work together is very daunting, especially for me, who, like I said earlier, I suck at scripting, and a lot of making factions work, new factions, is scripting. So that is something that I want to do, and I'll probably have to end up collaborating with some other community modder who is good at scripting to help me with that. I would love to make a true Lizardmen of Khorne faction. And then finally, one thing that's actually not even necessarily a mod, but something that I definitely have planned, is I would love to start making a guide series on YouTube of modding in Total Warhammer 3. YouTube tutorials for basically beginners, people who literally have no idea what to do, where to go, how to start, what means what does this program mean, what is this term you're using, I have no idea. Of course, I am not like the perfect modder. I am not the best of the best. I don't think of myself that way, but I think I am experienced enough to where I could definitely teach people at least the very basics and where to get started. Because I think once you get started and you sort of like pick up the first few tips and tricks, it's very easy to kind of almost learn it, like teach it to yourself from there, because you kind of just start figuring things out as you do trial and error. So if I can just make some guides on YouTube teaching people and getting them like first steps, I'd really want to do that.
I'll definitely put a link down to your YouTube channel, even if you haven't created anything yet. That way if people want to catch that in the future when you do that, I think that'd be a great idea. And even people probably would like to see you even just doing stuff of your own work, like if you're making textures and stuff like that. People really like enjoying that, enjoying people be creative like that. I'm sure if you recorded it, create a time lapse, increase the speed on it, a lot of people would enjoy the process of you creating textures and working on them. Just things like that. Yeah. It's a creative outlet.
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly thought about it before of, making YouTube content. Crazy enough, when I was like super, super young, this is like 10 years ago, I had a YouTube channel and I uploaded like just random footage at the time. And even though it was super cringe because I'm a young teenager, it was very, very fun. I enjoyed making things. I've always been a creative person. And so I think that especially now with this avenue of modding and how creative it can really get and how your imagination just go crazy with mods, I think that it would definitely be fun for me to kind of bring my creative process, my personality online and let people experience it.
No, I completely agree. And a lot of the Warhammer community, even in Total Warhammer 3, but then the Warhammer community in general is very passionate about Warhammer.
Oh God, yeah.
So they would definitely enjoy that, and they would enjoy your efforts. Would you ever start creating mods for other factions or Chaos Gods? I know you've created some already, but is there any that you would probably like focus into, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So like you said, I've definitely made a couple for the other Chaos Gods, and also just a couple of mods in general for other factions. I went kind of hard in the Tomb Kings with my Sentinels project, and that was actually really fun. The Iron Core and Aurelian for the Empire. Those were really fun. Truly, nothing in the game currently grasps me the way that Khorne does, that it doesn't speak to me in that way. I have such a passion for them as a faction. So I truly, I doubt that I will commit as hard to any other faction in the game as much as I have for Khorne. You're not going to see like a Tomb King's compilation where it has like, 20 mods in it, or like a Slanesh or anything like that. Because I don't have that passion. That's not, again, that's also not me saying that those factions are bad. By any means, you're allowed to like whatever you like. But just me personally, they don't have the appeal to me that Khorne does. And so I don't have a desire to really go super deep into anything else currently. That may change. Maybe, one day CI releases a DLC that really, adds something really fun to, like the vampire accounts, for example. And I'm like, oh, wow, I haven't actually played them that much. And they've got all these new toys. Oh, let's actually delve into them. And maybe all of a sudden vampire accounts are one of my favorite factions. So you never know. It depends what the future holds. But I think that no matter what, I'll never find a faction I love as much as Khorne.
By the way, kind of going back to that question earlier, you talked about creating those dragon lord characters. Would you be creating those kind of like the Grand Cathay style, where they would have an actual, normal body, and then they would transform into a dragon, or would it be something they would actually just be a dragon?
That is actually a good question, and I didn't consider it. I think it could actually be kind of cool, have a elven character transform into a dragon. The only thing that would be sort of limiting on that is animations, because obviously the Cathayan Dragon Lords, they have the animation where they transform from their human into a dragon, and dragon into a human, and it's very fluid. Whereas there's no animation to transform a high elf character into a high elf dragon. And I am someone who, like with scripting, I suck at animations. In general, making custom animations is an absolutely crazy thing. There are some great modders in the community who have done something like that. That is very much outside of my realm of expertise, so I have no idea. So definitely something I'd play around with if I could make it work. I think that'd be really cool. But if I couldn't, I'd probably just keep them just as their just base dragon form permanently.
How do you research or gather inspiration for your Khorne mods?
So truthfully, the answer is that it just comes from my head. Pretty much every single one of my Khorne mods, and I think mods in general, is just my own creation. It's just, I just had an idea one day. I woke up and I was like, what would be cool? What if there was, a Dreadsaurian, but it was Khorne? Okay, cool, let's make that. Or, oh, hey, what'd be cool is if there was a Bloodthirster Lord, and he was just super, super strong and had this big-ass sword. It's like, there's no research to really, I don't like look and be like, hey, what's a Khorne thing? Or what's lore that I can pull from? I think of something, and just make it. I make what I think looks cool and would be fun. It's purely just my own personal taste. And of course, I get that not everyone vibes with that. There's some people who are like, hey, this doesn't make lore sense. I know that a lot of people, I've got comments quite often, people saying, this doesn't make sense in the lore, oh, this breaks the lore, oh my god, Khorne using ranged weapons, this doesn't make any sense, this is breaking the lore. And I'm like, okay, but that's not what this mod is about. That's not what I'm about as a modder. I am not a lore accurate person. That doesn't mean I don't respect the lore. I love Warhammer lore, but for modding, I very much just make what I want to make. I make what I would love to play. I make what I think looks cool. And I think in general, that's like the healthiest way you can go about modding, is just doing what you want. Don't let other people tell you what you should or shouldn't make. Don't let other people say, oh, this sucks because it's not what I want. You should change it to fit my needs. It's like, no, it's your mod, it's your project, it's your baby. Do whatever feels right to you.
I get those questions very often in the comments of my spotlights about, is this lore accurate? And the answer is usually almost always no, but the reason why is the most popular mods aren't lore accurate. That's just how it is now. People, like there are lore accurate mods out there, But I would say if you look up the most popular subscribed mods that are like, new units, most of them are not lore accurate units.
Oh yeah. And I mean, the biggest reason is that people are creative. People have creative ideas, and the reason why, it's just like not everyone is in the position to like become this crazy like game developer and like make their own thing. They can't. They don't have those avenues. So modding is a great way for people to sort of let their creative freedom out. They can let their imagination kind of just flow, and they can just make whatever they want to, because we're very lucky again with Warhammer 3. We have these great tools available to us, and we have such the freedom in how we can make things and how easy it is, and like the scope of stuff we can make.
And not everything, even CA, not everything they make is 100% lore accurate. There are some times where they're given creative freedoms to create things for the game that Workshop has approved of. So, I mean, like, it happens, so it's not... I mean, I get people, it needs to be lore accurate. Well, if that's the case, then you probably shouldn't play the game, because there's going to be things that aren't lore accurate in the game. Because they've had to make it, because you got to balance accuracy with, is this fun or not?
I mean, I think if you take like lore accuracy into concern, I'm pretty sure, I could be 100% wrong on this, but I'm fairly certain that like bloodthirsters have an aura around them that completely negates any sort of ranged projectile, so that you have to fight them in melee. And so like that's how it is in the lore, I believe. I could be totally wrong again, and I apologize if I am, but like if you can't translate that to a game, because that's not fun. It would not be fun if you could not shoot a bloodthirster and had to fight it, because if you fight it in melee, a bloodthirster is just going to kick your ass.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to have balance, because like if it was 100% lore accurate, the Chaos factions would just wipe out every other faction in the game. Like there'd be no challenge. Like it'd just be, that's it. You just play a Chaos faction and you win. And then fighting them would be miserable. So, I mean, I get where people want things to be lore accurate, but at the same time, it's a game. You got to have fun. You gotta be, and everybody wants to feel like their faction they're playing is a bunch of badasses. You know what I mean? Like, you don't want to play a faction and go, this is my favorite faction, but they're weak and they're terrible and they're hard to play.
Exactly.
The next question we have here: how do you handle feedback from the community on your Khorne mods? I know a lot of people comment on your mods. I know that looking at comments, they're not always positive comments. A lot of times there's a lot of negativity or people just pointing out issues or problems.
Yeah, I think in general, when it comes to feedback, I absolutely welcome it. I think that as long as the comment isn't just something simple like, oh, this sucks, or oh, I hate this, or oh, hey, why isn't this way, like, as long as it's not just purely negative and it's actually like someone giving proper feedback, I'm fine with it. Constructive criticism, I think, is really, really great, and it's totally healthy for any sort of situation, not even just modding, but just in real life. If everyone around you says that what you do is perfect, how are you supposed to improve? How are you supposed to get better? Because if you think that what you're doing is perfect, you're not going to change. You don't adapt to things. You don't discover new things. For example, when I started modding, I very much didn't even think of balance. I very much was just like, I just want crazy high numbers on the units that I make because I think that's cool. And so initially on release, people told me, hey, this looks really cool, but balance is making this not fun to play. And I'm like, oh, you're silly, because this is how I want it. It's fun for me. But as more people said it, I kind of realized, hey, this is not working. People are not enjoying this. And while I think there is a balance you have to find between keeping people happy and also keeping your creative vision intact and not like compromising, I think there is definitely a middle ground where it's like, hey, if I want people to enjoy this and like really, want to play what I'm producing, you have to be willing to accept that what you made is not working. There's something wrong with it, or it could be improved and made better. And so I took that feedback into account of people saying, hey, balance is off, it's wacky, I don't like it. And as I tweaked things, I reduced some stats, I changed how some things worked. And then people said, hey, this now feels much better. Oh, I'm liking this now. Oh, it feels great. So yeah, I think that as long as it's like actual feedback, like people are saying, giving you ways that this could be better, and not just simply, hey, this sucks, you should not have made this. I think that any sort of feedback is very good.
I think you're 100% right. I mean, that has been a large shift. I feel like as people that, subscribe to mods, there's been a large shift between when mods first came out, everything was just really overpowered. And now a lot of modders are really focused on balancing and making it mesh really well in the game. And I will say this, modding in general for units, used to when Warhammer 3 first came out, if you loaded up a unit mod and I put it next to a vanilla unit, I could almost always tell you which one's the mod, which one's not, without ever knowing the full roster. You could just visually see it, and you could see it in stats and numbers. It was just obvious. Now, a lot of modders have increased in skill and in balancing to where if I mix in one random mod unit in the middle of a roster, it would be very hard for someone who doesn't know 100% the roster list to pick out the modded unit. So there has been a large skill increase, and I feel like people are now... you want your quality to be so good. You're like, well, is this a mod or is this what CA created? Oh,
exactly. And I mean, again, like, it's nobody, like, everyone has this idea in their head of, I want my unit to be the best. I want to, you want to win the game. You want to dominate the world map, whether if you're playing Mortal Empires or the Realm of Chaos, whatever you're playing, you want to win. And that's natural, but you want there to be challenge. You want it to feel like an earned win. And so if you have everything you use just be overpowered, it's like, there's no fun in that. I mean, maybe some people out there really do enjoy that play style, and that's totally fine. But I think in general, people want to win, but they want it to feel earned. And so if you can find a way to make your units feel like powerful and fun, but also feel like it's not just an instant I win button because I have modded units, I think that's the balance you want to strive for.
Okay, our next question here is, can you walk us through a day in the life of creating a Khorne mod?
For the most part, it depends on the mod, but in general, I always create the model first. I always do the visuals, the texturing, everything about that. I create the actual unit itself, whether it just be a single unit, whether it be a character I'm making, whether it's a mount or a new weapon, whatever. I do the visual stuff first because that's almost always the most annoying part, the most finicky part, the part where I often encounter the most issues, just because when it comes to string or re-rigging certain pieces together, it can become very annoying. So I get that out of the way. Then typically what I do, oh, hang on, lost my train of thought. That I had a, oh, here it is, sorry. A brain fart. Okay, there we go, sorry. Oh, got it. After the modeling and stuff is done, I create the bare necessities for whatever I'm making to work. Typically, even if I'm making a character, I turn it into a basic unit first, because I need to see how the model looks. Because obviously I can go through all this work of making the model first, but then if I make the unit, I'm like, oh shoot, model, it doesn't work, or like this animation is bugging out, or all the texturing looks off. That is when then I have to go back, I have to edit the model again. So I think once the model's done, you have to at least get the skeleton of your unit kind of made. So that's just simply allowing it to be like spawned in the game, it's allowed to work. Once I've got the skeleton done, that's when you add the flair. You add things like you actually adjust their stats to be what they're supposed to be. You give them any custom abilities. You edit, where they're recruited from. If it's a Regiment of Renown, you'll edit, what level it unlocks. If it's a character, you'll edit, how you recruit it. Does it spawn in naturally? What pool is it added to? What technology does it benefit from? What skills it has? That kind of thing. And once the flair is done, I usually just finish with the simple stuff, which is just text and UI. So I'll make any icons, any ability icons, unit icons, and then finish off with just all of the text.
Pretty much, we've talked about limitations, how there's certain things you can't change. Like I guess in the filing that you talked about your limitations with some of the scripting. What's one feature or unit you wish you could create for Khorne, regardless of any limitations?
This sounds silly, but this is purely just like what I just think this would look so cool, is being able to mount a bloodthirster on some kind of massive monster, whether that be like a big ass dragon or some kind of like big walking behemoth kind of thing. I would love to see a bloodthirster mounted on something and make like a bloodthirster king. I know that might not make sense because bloodthirsters in themselves are just walking monsters, so it'd be like mounting a monster on top of a monster. But I think the visual of this like super armored bloodthirster riding on top this massive armored dragon and just destroying the world would be so cool. I did attempt this once. The Strigoi Ghoul King for the vampire accounts, his in asset editor, his skeleton and his model sort of aligns with the Bloodthirster model. However, when it comes to actually animating them, it doesn't really work because one, the Bloodthirster has wings, and two, just the Strigoi Ghoul King, its overall body shape it doesn't match up super well or well enough to make it work. But I tried that because obviously the Strigoi Ghoul King, he can mount a Terrorgeist, and so I thought, okay, what if I could mount a Bloodthirster onto like a wyvern or something? I tried it, couldn't really get it to work, and so I'm like, I could maybe spend like hours upon hours trying to make it work, but I'm like, I'm just gonna leave it because there's that chance that, okay, I got the animation to work, but maybe something else came up that made it impossible. Like, I'm just gonna give it up. I would love to be able to do that.
What other Total War Warhammer 3 modders do you admire?
In general, I think that the Skeleton Crew modding team has made some of the best mods on the workshop. Their Legendary Characters compilation is something I have used since like it first released, and I haven't taken it off my mods list. I absolutely love it. And I love that while I am very much doing my own creative stuff, I'm making entirely new things. The Skeleton Crew with Legendary Characters, they very much are trying to make lore accurate characters, or sticking as much as they can to lore. And so they're bringing these fan favorite characters that might never see the light of day in a DLC from CA, and bringing to the game. They're not just making them just these generic characters. They're trying to give them like totally unique mechanics and new campaigns. And so I think that in general, I'm so happy that a mod team out there is doing that kind of thing. So yeah, the Skeleton Crew modding team, they do great work. I think also obviously Venris and the SFO team, I think are another just like all-stars. While they're not necessarily adding a huge roster of units, the sheer scale and scope of the SFO project and changing almost how the entire game works is so mind-blowing to me. The amount of time and effort and headaches they've probably gone through and still go through because they still keep updating it is so crazy. So like in general, like they're all stars. And then those are like two very big and popular ones. Like everyone knows SFO. I think most people know the Skeleton Crew by now. But there's a couple of sort of lesser known modders that I actually do quite enjoy. One of them is by someone named Zerg93. He sort of, how to describe him, he kind of just makes whatever he wants. Sort of like me, he kind of just comes up with these ideas that are just fun, I assume, sounding to him, and he just makes them. He's not super popular, and that's totally fine. Modding isn't a contest of popularity, but he just, from what I gather from him, he just kind of makes whatever he wants. He has an idea, he uploads it, he lets people like, hey, here's my idea, enjoy. If you don't enjoy, that's okay, I'm still gonna keep making stuff. I also know that he doesn't have the best PC, and I know that especially modding in a game like Total Warhammer 3 that is quite a demanding game, trying to mod for it without the proper hardware can be quite challenging. But he finds a way, he makes it happen, and he admits that, hey, I don't have the best stuff, my screenshots are not great, but he still wants to make content. He still has a passion for it. He still he does what he wants to do. And I think that It's like one of the best aspects of a modder is just doing what you want. So Zerg 93, and he covers a variety of factions too. It's not just one thing. He's made units for tons of factions. So check him out because he'll probably have at least one thing that you will like. And then the final one is he's a Chinese modder. Unfortunately, I don't know how to pronounce his name as it's in Chinese. I can't translate that. But if you go on the workshop and search things like the Khorne Gorgon, the Khorne and Mammoth, you'll find him. And he has made some very good models. I think for him specifically, he's great when it comes to reskins and visual model design. He's done mostly, I think, reskins like turning Krell, the Vampire Counts hero, into a fully Khorne visual. It doesn't change his mechanics at all, so like you can only use him as Vampire Counts, but still, he took a Vampire Counts unit and just converted him to Khorne in like the same way that I kind of would. He's made a really nice reskin for Akold Hellbrass. He's made a reskin for Valkia, which I personally used, giving her a really cool helmet. He's reskinned a lot of Lizardman characters, like Krokars, Carnosaur, Grimlock. I believe he's made a Gorok reskin. He's also just made some entirely new and unique characters to the Lizardmen, like a pair of Kroxigor, I think, heroes that kind of parallel together. But in general, he has just made some very visually stunning models.
I've actually got to check some of those out. I have not, I don't think Skeleton Crew, I don't think I've ever checked out their work before.
Yeah, they've made legendary characters. They've made Tribes of the North, which is a massive Norska mod.
Oh, okay, so I guess, okay, never mind, I have checked out their work then.
Yeah, they also go by Team SCM on Steam.
Oh, okay, okay, there we go, never mind. I know what you're talking about now. I guess for me, like, the acronym was what was sticking out in my head, but then, like, when you said it, I felt like, oh, okay, there you go.
Yeah, I assume SCM is Skeleton Crew modding or something like that.
Oh yeah, they're great. Yeah, fantastic modders. I will say this. I know what you mean about there's a lot of Asian modders I see, and you cannot pronounce their names. And I will say this: Asian modders have some of the craziest mods I've ever seen. Like you'll be like, yeah. I've checked out quite a few. I have a quirky mod video where I've checked out some just like flying ships, and like there's one that's like an entirely flying city. It's a unit.
Yes.
Yeah, just crazy mods. And then some, if you're like a fan of Dynasty Warriors, I've found some that add like Liu Bei and Guan Yu and like these characters from Dynasty Warrior into the game, and I thought that's hilarious.
Oh yeah, I mean they go crazy with the stuff they make.
Yeah, I think the only issue is a lot of them, the really good ones they'll have an English translation mod, but then if they don't, you just have a lot of blank units. Like they don't have, because in English there's nothing there.
Yeah, it's empty.
Yeah, that is the challenge. But a lot of them now have started doing like, English translation patches or secondary mods you run to translate everything over to English. Yeah, I've covered a couple Grand Cathay mods lately that are Asian modder created, and they're great. Yeah, I fully recommend those. As a modder, what would you like CA to add into the game into the future, whether it be features, factions, whole new regions? What would you like to see?
So there's two things. As a player, I'd love to have a proper like end time scenario, like a true scenario where chaos becomes like just this overwhelming apocalypse. It's where like the rest of the world has to unite together to fight them off. I really love that kind of no longer concerned of conquering them out like this sandbox Mortal Empires. It's like I want a scenario where it is the forces of chaos versus the forces of order, and they are clashing. I don't know if that's within their feasibility. I don't know if Games Workshop will allow them to do that or not, but I would love to see a scenario like that. And then as a modder, this is just a big quality of life. I would love to have it so where it'd be so much easier to tell what causes a crash. Because currently, when the game crashes, it just gives you a crash report that is completely indecipherable, and you have no idea what the it's very caused the problem. There are some cases where if the game crashes on startup, it'll sometimes say error in this blah 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 in RPFM this line, and they give you an idea. But if you're in the game itself and you're just playing the game and all of a sudden you encounter a crash, there is absolutely no way to tell what happened or why there was a crash. And so it doesn't even tell you what mod, for example, might be causing the issue. So it's just so much of trial and error and guessing, okay, what's the problem child? Which mod is causing the issue? Okay, in this mod, what exactly, like what line in the data is causing the issue? Because sometimes RPFM might not actually tell you if there's an error or not, so you just have to kind of guess. Sometimes it could be as simple as in a data entry, you have a decimal point in the wrong place. And so in the game, it can't recognize that number, and so it just crashes. But you'd have absolutely no idea and no way of knowing that. So I really wish, I don't know how possible it is, because modding, it's not like a CA official thing. Modding is very much like it's something the community does. But I would love to have a clear understanding of what causes crashes.
Brian Sales de la Cruz wants to know if they want to know if you can create a mod with new factions for Slaanesh or Norska.
So yeah, again, I've said that nothing will grab me like Khorne has. That doesn't mean I'm completely saying no to every other faction, because what's in a way about doing factions outside of Khorne is it kind of stretches my creativity a bit, because I'm working with something totally new, something I don't know the formula of. I don't have a routine of, I know exactly how to make a Khorne thing. So when I branch out and make something for, like, example, the other Chaos Gods or a different faction, it's kind of a way for me to see, like, okay, let's do something new. Let's have a challenge. Let's try and make something that I've never done before. And so that can be fun. What I will say is for Norska, probably not, because in general, I'm not a huge fan of their visual design. I like armor. I like big armored men, big armored monsters and stuff, and Norska is very much not that. Norska does not have a lot of armor. They're very much, Northmen with leather straps and fur and stuff. And while there are some units from Norska that I really do like, I like a lot of their monsters, but in terms of like their actual units and stuff, and like infantry and men, it's just not super appealing to me. So again, I'm not gonna say it's never gonna happen, but I right now I don't have any desire for Norska. Slaanesh though, and I think in general the other Chaos Gods, there's still a lot of possibility there for me to kind of experiment and do different things. For example, I made a soul grinder of Khorne, and then later on I'm like, hey, it'd be cool to make a soul grinder for the three gods, and doing that was actually really fun. I enjoyed that. Same thing with the legendary lords. I made the Charred Judge for Khorne by Bloodthirster Lord. I'm like, that was cool. Okay, what if I made the Exalted Demon legendary lords for the other Chaos Gods? That was also really, really fun. So there are certain cases where even if the faction itself is not necessarily my favorite, it can still be quite fun to kind of step out of my comfort zone and sort of, flex my brain a bit and try and be like, okay, can I make this work? Okay, what tools can I use? Or, okay, how can I make this look fun? How can I give this, cool abilities, that kind of thing. So I don't like giving timelines and saying yes on things, because my mood can change so drastically between what I want and what I don't want to make. I can definitely say that more chaos content for the other three gods is definitely something that will happen.
Hey, awesome. They'll be happy to hear that. And I've got to say, your soul grinders and your other lord units that you've made for the other chaos factions turned out great. All of those look really good. I was very impressed by the work on them. This question goes along with the same one that was just asked, pretty much. Infinity7644 just wanted to know if you had plans to make similar mods for other chaos gods, and you've pretty much said that's on the table of possibility.
I think, again, definitely a possibility. I don't like to say yes or no definitively, because again, some days I might really want to, some days I might not. So I don't like to commit to that kind of thing. But for the Chaos Gods, the other three, absolutely more stuff will come. It just depends on what and when, but there will definitely be more.
I'm going to kind of tweak this question by Immortal Empire's King 9168, but He was talking about the Lost Calm Jurassic mod. I don't know if you've seen that mod.
Oh yeah, no, I like that one. That one's a very well done mod.
Yeah, there's a lot of really cool. Would there be any inspiration to coordinate any of those type of, I guess, any of the units in that mod with the modder's permission, kind of make a Khorne version of any of those?
Oh, that's actually a good question. And actually, someone asked me that quite a while ago. I think when the Lost Com mod kind of first was introduced, he said, "Hey, have you seen this mod? Would you ever try cornifying some of them?" And at the time, I wasn't sure, because in general, there's no like rule against it. But I'm not a huge fan of like taking someone else's work and just being like, "Hey, I'm gonna make my own version of it." Again, that's just more of a me thing. I'm not a huge fan of that. I like to make my own thing. But I will say, given that I've cornified the entire Lizardman roster, I think there is absolutely a place and a way for me to take some of the stuff from the Lost Com mod and definitely turn it to Khorne. I think the only issue is that some of them might be almost too similar to things I've made already, or things that already exist kind of in the game. For example, one of the units that I really like in the Lost Com mod are two different variants. There's like Saurus right on top of what is like an Allosaurus, and Saurus running on top of what is sort of like an amphibious lizard thing that's based off of the rat abomination of the Skaven, like just the giant rat. I forget what it's called. But there's two units, so it's basically Saurus running on top of some kind of monster thing. And those would be really cool to turn into Khorne, but the issue is that they might be too similar to, for the Allosaurus, they kind of might be similar to just a cold one, just like kind of scaled up a bit, and with a little bit of a different look, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it kind of just comes down to how similar is it to what I've already made. At that point, okay, well, is it even worth it to try and bring that over, or am I just doing it just for fun? So, like, I won't say yes or no. It's that thing, that sort of idea is definitely a bit more kind of just up in the air. I might get to it, I might not. I'm definitely not going to commit to saying anything as of right now.
I've got to admit that was a very impressive mod. That mod kind of got me into actually going full on into spotlighting in general, just because I had such a fun time creating the video for that. And the alien looking units, everyone describes them as alien looking units. There's a few in there. Those are actually very, to me, they look good in combat, and they come off very creepy, alien, reptilian. They like that.
Oh yes, I forget what he calls them in the mod, but I know exactly which ones you're talking about. And those actually could be fun to cornify, because they almost do like look kind of chaos in a way, just because of how crazy and alien they look. So I actually feel like those in particular could be kind of fun cornify. Just give them a different texture, maybe slap some Khorne armor onto them. I think that could actually be kind of fun to do.
The next question here is something you've kind of already answered, but it's from Andrew Patterson. What drew you to Khorne specifically? If you want to go into like something very specific.
There was an old RTS game, I'm sure a lot of people know it, is Dawn of War, in the 40,000 Warhammer 40,000 universe. So the sci-fi version of Warhammer. And in that game, there wasn't a Khorne faction. There were the Khorne Berserkers. And when I was younger playing the game and I saw the Khorne Berserkers, something about the way they looked just was so cool to me. I don't know why. Maybe it was like their crazy horned helmet, or the fact that they were just these crazy screaming guys who were just charging into battle with a big axe and chopping things up. Something about seeing them in that game was just like, wow, that's really, really cool. And I think from there, just as I slowly just learned more about Khorne, watched videos, read into the lore a bit, my love for Khorne just kind of grew from there. And actually, the Khorne Berserkers became the first ever mod that I'd made. I added the Khorne Berserkers to Warhammer 3. A very simple mod on it, and compared to what I make now, it was just like the Chosen of Khorne with a little bit of armor change. And they had armor sundering attacks and the Berserk ability, and that was it. It was Regiment of Renown, very simple. It was my first mod, obviously, but the Khorne Berserkers were basically the catalyst that ignited my love for Khorne.
This one's actually more detailed. This is kind of a couple part question here. It's from Chop Chop Workshop. What was the first mod you ever did and why? And do you still play the game or the mod? And do you use the dark theme in RPFM?
So I'll do RPFM just really quick. I didn't actually know RPFM had a dark mode. So like I've been using light mode, I guess, the entire time I've used it. But typically I very much am a dark mode person. Almost everything I do online, I try and switch to dark mode. So now that I know that RPFM has a dark mode, I'll absolutely be switching to it. The first one I ever did actually was not technically Khorne Berserkers. The Khorne Berserkers was the first one I ever uploaded. But the first time I ever modded something was actually my Khorne Soul Grinder. That was the first time I had ever played around with 3D modeling and making an entirely new unit. I did it kind of just on the side in the background. But playing around with the Soul Grinder of Khorne, I took like the skull little ornament from Scarbrand's loincloth kind of thing, and I stuck it onto the Soul Grinder of Khorne's face to make it have like a skull mask. Then I took the Bloodthirster armor and attached onto the Soul Grinder, and I played around with trying to make that work. And that was kind of like that was the first time I really actually modded. Of course, again, the Khorne Berserkers I ended up uploading first. The Soul Grinder of Khorne was the first model I ever made. And then the other question was, do I still play the game or do I mod mostly? It's kind of on and off. There are times when, for a long time, I actually didn't really play the game because I had so many ideas in my head that as soon as I started playing, I'm like, oh, here's a new idea. Okay, I want to go make that. And so I never really sat down and just played the game. But now that I've kind of made pretty much most of the Khorne stuff that I kind of wanted to make or even planned on making, it's definitely easier for me to just sit down and play because I don't have these ideas constantly popping into my head of, oh, I want to make that, I want to make that. And also, it's so cool to sit down, play a Khorne campaign, and be able to use almost entirely stuff that I have made in my campaign. It's very much a very gratifying feeling of like, hey, I made this. This is all coming from me, and I get to play with it. It's not just like an idea I have in my head of, oh, that'd be cool to maybe see one day. It's like, no, I have made this. I get to play with it. I get to see my work in action. And so now it's very much more of like, I enjoy now just sitting down and playing because I get to play with all the stuff that I've made. It's a really cool thing for me.
Well, that's all the community questions I had. Is there any closing remarks or statements you would like to make?
Just like thank you for doing this interview. When I started modding, I had never even dreamed of becoming, I don't want to say famous, but like a known name in the community. And now I see that people are making like showcases of my work. People are making cinematic battles of my units versus others. I've had like a couple of articles written about mods that I've made. I've even had a couple of real life experiences where people have like come up to me and we've talked, and I tell them like, oh yeah, I've made mods for this game. My username is this. And people are like, hey, I know you. It's like the scale that this has become is so mind-blowing to me, and the fact that I've done an interview with someone, it's like it's so crazy to me, and I feel like just so lucky to be in the position that I'm in. So like truly thank you for for like putting me in this spotlight and for doing this interview with me and for letting me sort of just allow myself to just be out there.
Hey, it's no problem. It was really fun. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah.
I've actually reached out to a couple other modders that would love to interview as well. And who knows, maybe they'll see this and go, okay, yeah, that is something I'd be interested in. I know modders a lot of times they are more private people, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I kind of get it, not wanting to be too much out there. And you never know somebody's situation or their setup. You know, an interview might be really hard for them to pull off, or maybe between work and modding, they just don't have the time. And that's all the questions I had. I mean, as we talked about before, everything we've talked about will be down in the description. Links to your projects, YouTube channel, donations, anything we mentioned here will also be down in the description. I just want to say thank you for taking the time to do this. We went kind of past our hour mark, but I do really appreciate it.